Jake Morrison was having the strangest week of his life, and that was saying something considering he had once been stuck in an asteroid mining tunnel with a broken oxygen recycler and a very angry space hamster. Every day seemed to bring new weirdness, and it all centered around Princess Lyrith. The alien princess had started showing up everywhere he worked. At first, Jake thought it was just coincidence, but by the 5th day, he realized she was actually seeking him out. She would appear in whatever section he was assigned to, always with some excuse about needing to inspect the human Zalari integration systems or check on trade route security. What made it even stranger was that she always brought gifts. Small things at first. A crystalline flower that hummed when touched, a piece of fruit from her homeworld that tasted like honey and starlight, a small device that projected holographic butterflies. Jake had never received gifts from a woman he barely knew, especially not an alien princess. "Thank you, princess," he said each time, because his mother had taught him to always be gracious when someone gave you something, even if you did not understand why they were giving it. "This is very thoughtful of you." Each time he thanked her, Lyrith's crystal patches would glow brighter, and she would make soft musical sounds that her translator device never seemed to pick up. Jake assumed these were expressions of happiness, in her language. The gifts kept getting more elaborate. She brought him a necklace made of singing crystals that supposedly brought good luck. She offered him a small potted plant that could survive in space and would provide fresh air wherever he worked. She even presented him with what appeared to be some kind of ceremonial blade with a handle carved from what she called starbone. "Princess, these are beautiful, but I can't accept such expensive gifts," Jake protested after she tried to give him what looked like a crown made of liquid light. "Please, you must accept them," Lyrith insisted. "They are traditional offerings of appreciation for your kindness." Jake was not sure what kind of appreciation required a crown, but he did not want to offend her by refusing. He carefully stored each gift in his quarters and made mental notes to research Zalari gift-giving, customs when he had time. The situation got even more confusing when Lyrith started asking him personal questions during their encounters. She wanted to know about his family, his childhood, his hopes for the future. She asked if he had ever been married, if he wanted children, what kind of home he dreamed of having someday. These seemed like very intimate questions to ask someone you barely knew, but Jake figured maybe Zalari culture was just more open than human culture. He answered honestly because he had nothing to hide. Yes, he hoped to get married someday and have kids. No, he had not found the right woman yet. He would like to have a house with a big workshop where he could fix things and maybe a garden where he could grow vegetables. Lyrith listened to every word with intense attention, her crystal patches glowing and shifting colors and patterns Jake was beginning to recognize as signs of strong emotion. She asked follow-up questions about everything, taking mental notes like she was planning to write a book about his life story. "What kind of woman do you hope to marry?" she asked one day while he was replacing a faulty sensor array. Jake paused in his work to think about it. "Someone kind, I guess. Someone who laughs at my jokes even when they're not funny. Someone who doesn't mind that I work with my hands and come home dirty sometimes. Someone who wants to build a life together, you know?" Lyrith's entire body began to glow softly. "You desire a partner who will share your burdens and joys equally." Yeah, exactly. Marriage should be a partnership, not just two people living in the same house. "And children? How many offspring do you wish to create?" That was a pretty direct question, but Jake answered it anyway. "2 or 3, maybe. Enough to keep things interesting, but not so many that we can't give them all the attention they deserve. Lyrith nodded seriously, like she was filing this information away for future reference. You would be a good father. You are patient and gentle, and you fix things that are broken. Jake felt his face get warm at the compliment. Thanks, Princess. That means a lot coming from you. The conversations were getting more personal every day, but Jake told himself it was just cultural curiosity. Lyrith was probably fascinated by human family structures since they were so different from Zalari traditions. It made sense that she would ask questions. What did not make sense was what happened next. Jake was in the main corridor replacing burned-out light panels when he heard music coming from the direction of the Zalari quarters. It was beautiful music, complex harmonies that seemed to make the air itself vibrate with emotion. He had never heard anything like it. Other people in the corridor had stopped to listen too. Even Commander Harper was standing in her office doorway, looking amazed. The music went on for nearly an hour, rising and falling like waves, telling some kind of story without words. When it finally ended, Jake found himself applauding along with everyone else. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. What was that? He asked Pete, who was working nearby. Sounded like some kind of Zalari ceremony, Pete said. Maybe religious or something. Later that day, Jake ran into Lyrith in the cafeteria. She looked tired but happy, like someone who had just finished something important. That was incredible music earlier, he told her. Was that you singing? Lyrith's crystal patches turned bright pink. You heard the Song of Intent? If that's what it was called, yes. It was beautiful. You have an amazing voice. The Song of Intent is not performed lightly, she said, her voice soft and serious. It declares one's deepest wishes to the universe and asks for blessing on important decisions. What kind of decisions? Jake asked. Lyrith looked directly into his eyes. Decisions about the future, about partnerships, about choosing one's path in life. Jake nodded, though he was not entirely sure what she meant. Well, whatever you were singing about, I hope it works out for you. I believe it will, she said with a smile that made her whole face light up. The next day brought the biggest surprise yet. Jake was eating lunch in the cafeteria when Commander Harper's voice came over the station intercom. Attention all personnel. Please report to Conference Room Alpha for an important announcement from the Zalari delegation. Attendance is mandatory. Jake had never been to a diplomatic meeting before. Conference Room Alpha was the fancy room where the station leaders met with important visitors. It had a big table made of polished metal and chairs that actually had cushions. The room was packed when Jake arrived. All the senior staff were there, plus representatives from the various departments. The Zalari delegation was seated on one side of the table, looking formal and official in their ceremonial robes. Princess Lyrith stood at the head of the table. She looked different somehow, more regal and commanding than Jake had ever seen. Her crystal patches were glowing steadily, and her voice carried easily through the room when she began to speak. Honored humans of New Geneva Colony Station, she said, I come before you today to make an announcement that will strengthen the bonds between our peoples and ensure prosperity for future generations. Jake wondered what kind of trade deal they had negotiated. Maybe they were going to buy more minerals or share some of their advanced technology. After careful consideration and observation of human customs, Lyrith continued, I have chosen to enter into a formal bonding agreement with one of your people. This union will symbolize the friendship between our species and create new opportunities. For cultural exchange, the room buzzed with surprised whispers. Jake had not expected this. An alien princess marrying a human would definitely be big news across the galaxy. The individual I have chosen has demonstrated all the qualities my people value most highly. He is kind, generous, hard-working, and treats all beings with respect regardless of their station in life. He has proven his worthiness through ritual, service, and has expressed his desire for partnership and offspring. Jake found himself wondering who this lucky guy was. It had to be someone important, maybe one of the senior officers or department heads. Lireth's crystal patches brightened, even more as she reached the climax of her announcement. Therefore, I formally request permission to bond with maintenance engineer Jake Morrison of Ohio, Earth, in accordance with both human and Zalari customs. The room went completely silent. Jake felt like someone had hit him in the head with a plasma wrench. Everyone was staring at him. Commander Harper's mouth was hanging open. The other maintenance engineers were looking at him like he had just sprouted wings and started flying around the room. "I'm sorry, what?" Jake managed to say. Lireth smiled at him with genuine warmth and affection. "I am asking for your hand. In marriage, Jake Morrison. Will you accept my proposal and become my life partner?" Jake's brain completely stopped working. He opened and closed his mouth several times, but no sounds came out. Marriage? To an alien princess? When had that become an option? "Princess," Commander Harper said quickly. "I think there might be some kind of misunderstanding here." "No misunderstanding," Lireth said firmly. Jake Morrison performed the door ceremony, offered ritual gifts of service, expressed his desire for a mate and children, and listened with approval to my song of intent. He has fulfilled all. The emergency meeting that followed was the most uncomfortable hour of Jake's life, and that included the time he had been trapped in a maintenance shaft with a family of very territorial space rats. Commander Harper sat across from him looking like she was developing a headache, while Princess Lireth stared at the table with her crystal patches flickering between different colors like a broken light display. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Commander Harper said slowly. "Princess Lireth, you believe that Jake performed some kind of marriage proposal ritual by holding a door open for you?" "The door ceremony is the most sacred form of courtship declaration among my people," Lireth said quietly. "To offer physical service to someone of royal blood without being commanded is to declare oneself ready for life bonding." Jake rubbed his face with his hands. "Princess, I hold doors for everyone. It's just good manners where I come from. If I had known it meant something different to your people, I would have explained." "But you continued the courtship displays," Lireth protested, looking up at him with her large silver eyes. "You offered me precedence in elevators. You retrieved my dropped belongings. You shared intimate details about your family and your desire for a mate." "I was being polite and making conversation," Jake said. "I talk to everyone like that, the pub." Zalari translator, an elderly male named Thekmor, spoke up in his musical voice. "Commander Harper, this is a very serious situation. Among our people, once formal courtship has begun, it cannot be simply dismissed. To refuse completion of the bonding would bring great shame to both bloodlines." "But there was no formal courtship," Jake insisted. "This is all a misunderstanding." "The misunderstanding does not change what has occurred," another Zalari said. This one wore more elaborate robes and had larger crystal patches than the others. "I am High Counselor Vexathon. Princess Lireth has publicly declared her intention to bond with your Jake Morrison. In our culture, such declarations are binding." Commander Harper looked like she was starting to panic. What exactly does that mean for the station and our trade agreements? If the bonding is completed, it will strengthen ties between our peoples, High Counselor Vexthon said. If it is refused, it will be seen as an insult to the royal family and to all Zalari. How much of an insult are we talking about? Commander Harper asked. The High Counselor's crystal patches darkened. Princess Lyrith is the daughter of Emperor Kethron Starforge. To publicly shame her would be considered an act of hostility toward the Zalari Empire. Jake felt his stomach drop. Are you saying that if I don't marry the princess, it could cause a war? Not immediately, Thekmor said. But it would certainly end all trade relationships and potentially lead to more serious conflicts. Commander Harper stood up and began pacing. This is insane. We can't force someone to get married just to maintain a trade agreement. Perhaps there is another solution, High Counselor Vexthon said. In our culture, there is one acceptable way to refuse a bonding after courtship has begun. The suitor must prove themselves unworthy through a trial of dishonor. What kind of trial? Jake asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know. The suitor must demonstrate that they lack the qualities necessary for royal partnership. They must show themselves to be cowardly, selfish, cruel, or incompetent in front of witnesses. Jake looked around the room. So I have to prove I'm a terrible person? It is the only way to end the bonding agreement without causing shame to the princess, Thekmor explained. I can't do that, Jake said. Princess Lyrith seems like a nice person. I don't want to hurt her feelings just to get out of this mess. Princess Lyrith looked up at him with surprise. Even in the middle of this disaster, his first thought was about not hurting her. Her crystal patches flickered with something that might have been admiration. There must be another way, Commander Harper said. What if we explain human customs to your people? Show them that what Jake did was normal behavior, not courtship. It does not matter what he intended, High Counselor Vexthon said firmly. What matters is what occurred. He performed the rituals, she responded appropriately, and she made a public declaration. The bonding agreement exists, whether he meant to create it or not. Jake stood up suddenly. Okay, wait. Everyone just calm down for a minute, let me think. He started pacing around the room, his mind working through the problem like it was a broken machine that needed fixing. There had to be a solution that did not involve him either getting married to someone he barely knew or starting an interstellar war. Princess Lyrith, he said finally. You said you've been studying human customs, right? She nodded. For many days. I wanted to understand your courtship rituals. And what did you learn about how humans treat each other? You are more egalitarian than my people. You show kindness to individuals regardless of their social status. You help those who need assistance without expecting reward. Exactly, Jake said, getting excited. So doesn't that seem strange to you? If holding doors and being polite was how human males chose their mates, wouldn't we all be married to dozens of people by now? Lyrith looked confused. 3 months had passed since the Great Engagement misunderstanding, and Jake Morrison thought life on New Geneva Colony Station had finally returned to normal. He was wrong about that, as he discovered when Princess Lyrith requested another meeting with the senior staff. This time, however, she was not alone. 3 Zalari ships had arrived during the night, bringing what appeared to be an entire delegation of high-ranking officials. Commander Harper looked nervous as she briefed Jake before the meeting. The princess says she has important news to share with us, Harper said. Something about changes in Zalari society that could affect our trade relationship. Good changes or bad changes? Jake asked. She wouldn't say, but she specifically asked for you to be present at the meeting. Jake sighed. He had hoped his involvement in interspecies diplomacy was over. Do you think I accidentally proposed to someone else without knowing it? Let's hope not, Harper said grimly. The conference room was packed when they arrived. The Phi Zalari delegation took up one entire side of the table, all wearing formal robes that shifted colors in the light. Princess Lyreth stood at the head of the table, but she looked different than she had 3 months ago. Her posture was more confident, more authoritative, and her crystal patches glowed with steady determination. "Honored humans of New Geneva Colony Station," she began, "I come before you today to share momentous news about changes occurring within the Zalari Empire." Jake noticed that several of the Zalari officials looked uncomfortable, their crystal white patches flickering with what he had learned were signs of anxiety or disapproval. Over the past 3 months, I have been studying human social customs and philosophy. What I learned during my time on this station has inspired me to propose significant reforms to our traditional way of life. High Counselor Vex Thon, who had remained on the station as a cultural liaison, leaned forward. "Princess, perhaps you should explain the context." "Of course," Lyrith said. "When I returned to our home world to report on the trade negotiations, I also shared my observations about human society. I described how humans treat all individuals with basic respect, regardless of their social position. I explained the concept of what you call common courtesy." She paused, letting her words sink. My father, Emperor Kethron Starforge, was initially skeptical. The idea that servants and laborers should be treated the same as nobility seemed absurd to him, but I persisted in my arguments, and eventually convinced him to allow a small experiment. Jake had a sinking feeling about where this was going. "What kind of experiment?" "I established a trial colony on one of our smaller worlds, where we implemented human-style social protocols. Instead of rigid hierarchy, we encouraged cooperation and mutual assistance. Instead of commanding obedience, we practiced asking politely and saying thank you. Instead of expecting service based on rank, we taught people to help each other voluntarily." The room was completely silent. Everyone was staring at Princess Lyrith as if she had just announced that she had learned to fly. "And what happened?" Commander Harper asked carefully. Lyrith's crystal patches brightened with obvious pride. "The colony became the most productive and peaceful settlement in the outer territories. Work efficiency increased by 40%. Crime dropped to nearly 0. Citizens reported higher levels of satisfaction and well-being than anywhere else. In the Empire." One of the senior Zalari officials, an elderly female with deep purple crystal patches, spoke up in their musical language. Thekmor translated. "High Minister Kelnya says the results were impressive, but questions whether such methods would work on a larger scale. Which is why I have come here today," Princess Lyrith said, turning to look directly at Jake. "I wish to establish a formal cultural exchange program between our peoples. I want to bring groups of young Zalari here to learn human customs firsthand, and I want to send human volunteers to our worlds to teach these principles to our people." Jake felt that familiar sinking sensation in his stomach. "Princess, I'm honored that you think I could help, but I'm just a maintenance engineer. I don't know anything about teaching or diplomacy." "You know everything that matters," Lyrith said firmly. "You understand instinctively what it means to treat others with kindness and respect. You demonstrated this every day without even thinking about it. That is exactly what my people need to learn." "She's right," Commander Harper said unexpectedly. Jake, you've had a bigger impact on interspecies relations than any trained diplomat. Maybe it's time to consider a career change. I like fixing machines, Jake protested. I'm not qualified to fix entire societies. Princess Lyrith smiled at that. But that is precisely your qualification. You see problems that need to be solved, and you fix them in the most practical way possible. Zalari society has a problem, and we need someone with your particular skills to help us repair it. High Minister Kelnya spoke again, and this time she sounded less skeptical. Thekmore translated. She says that if this human's methods can truly bring such improvements to our society, perhaps the experiment should be expanded. There is more, Princess Lyrith continued. My father has been so impressed with the results of the trial colony that he has decided to formalize the reforms. He is creating a new position in the government, Minister of Social Harmony. The role would involve overseeing the implementation of courtesy protocols throughout the Empire. She paused dramatically, and Jake had a terrible suspicion about what was coming next. He has offered this position to the human who inspired these changes. Jake Morrison, my father invites you to become the first non-Zalari minister in the history of our empire. The room erupted in surprised voices and excited conversations. Jake sat in stunned silence, trying to process what he had just heard. 3 months ago, he had been an anonymous maintenance worker. Now an alien emperor wanted to make him a government minister. I can't possibly accept that, he said when the noise died down. I don't know anything about governing or politics or running an empire. You would not be governing, Princess Lyrith explained. You would be teaching, showing our people by example how to treat each other with dignity and respect. You would have a staff of assistants and advisors to handle the administrative details. But what about my life here, my job, my family back on Earth? The position comes with significant benefits, High Minister Kelenya said through Thekmore. A generous salary, a residence on the capital world, travel throughout the Empire, and the opportunity to shape the future of an entire civilization. Also, your family would be welcome to visit or relocate if they chose. Jake looked around the room at the expectant faces. Everyone seemed to think this was an amazing opportunity that he would be crazy to refuse. But all he could think about was how much his life would change and how scared he was of making such a big decision. Can I have some time to think about it? He asked. Of course, Princess Lyrith said. This is a significant choice that should not be made hastily. The meeting broke up after that, with various officials discussing implementation details and timelines. Jake escaped to his quarters to think. His small room suddenly felt very cramped compared to the vast possibilities he was being offered. He video-called his parents that evening to tell them about the opportunity. His mother cried when she heard the news, telling him how proud she was that her lessons about politeness had made such a difference. His father, ever practical, wanted to know about the salary and benefits package. But what do you want to do, honey? His mother asked. Don't make this decision based on what other people expect. That was the question Jake had been avoiding. What did he want? He had always been content with his simple life, fixing machines and traveling between stations. But something had changed over the past few months. He had seen how his actions could affect other people, how simple kindness could ripple outward to create bigger changes. Maybe it was time to think bigger than just fixing machines. Maybe he could help fix something more important. 2 days later, Jake gave Princess Lyrith his answer. He would accept the position with one condition. He wanted to spend half his time actually working with regular Zalari citizens, not just sitting in meetings with government officials. I need to stay connected to real people doing real jobs, he explained. Otherwise, I'll forget what this is all about. Princess Lyrith agreed immediately. That is exactly the kind of wisdom we need in this position. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood in the main plaza of Zalara Prime, the capital city of the Zalari Empire, watching something that would have been impossible a year ago. Zalari citizens were holding doors for each other, helping strangers, carry heavy packages, and saying please and thank you in casual conversation. Children who had been taught the new courtesy protocols were teaching their parents how to be polite. The changes had not been without resistance. Some of the older nobility still grumbled about treating commoners as equals, but the results were undeniable. Productivity was up across all sectors, civil unrest had virtually disappeared, and public satisfaction ratings were at historical highs. You have done something remarkable, Princess Lyrith said, joining Jake in the plaza. She had been appointed as his deputy minister, helping to coordinate the cultural reforms. We all did it together, Jake corrected. I just held a door. Everyone else, Princess Lyrith Moonweaver, sat in her private chambers staring at the human data files she had requested from the station's computer. She had been studying human behavior for 3 days now, and everything she read only confirmed what she already believed. The human male named Jake Morrison had clearly chosen her as his intended mate. The door ceremony had been unmistakable. Among her people, offering physical service to someone of royal blood was the most sacred form of courtship declaration. No one had dared to court her in such a bold way before. Most suitors were too afraid of her father to even look at her directly. But this human had approached her without fear, had touched the barrier that protected her, and had spoken the ritual words, "After you, ma'am," which her translator had explained meant, "I offer you precedence in all things." Such poetry in those simple words. Lyrith's personal servant, Kesra, entered the room carrying a tray of crystalline fruit. "Princess, you have not eaten today. You must maintain your strength." "Kesra, tell me more about human courtship customs," Lyrith said without looking up from the data screen. "Princess, I know little of such things. Perhaps you should speak with the cultural liaison." "No, I must understand this myself. Look at this." She pointed to an entry about human social behavior. It says here that human males demonstrate their worthiness through acts of service and protection. They open doors, they carry heavy objects, they offer food. Everything matches what Jake Morrison did for me. Kesra looked concerned. "Princess, are you certain the human was courting you? Perhaps he was simply being kind." Lyrith's crystal patches flashed bright blue with annoyance. Kindness to strangers is not logical. Why would he help someone he does not know unless he wished to bond with them? No, this was clearly a mating display. She turned back to the data files and continued reading. Human courtship was apparently much more complex than Zalari rituals. Instead of a single formal declaration, humans performed many small acts over time to prove their devotion. This explained why Jake Morrison continued to appear wherever she went. The day after the door ceremony, Lyrith had decided to test her theory by visiting the maintenance areas where the human worked. She wanted to see if he would perform more courtship displays. She had not been disappointed. When the elevator doors opened and she stepped inside, Jake Morrison was already there. Instead of ignoring her, as most males would do, he had immediately moved to the control panel and asked, "Which floor?" in his pleasant voice. When she told him level 7, he had pressed the button for her. Another service display. But it got even better. When they reached her floor, he had gestured for her to exit first, saying, After you. Those same ritual words again. And when she hesitated at the elevator threshold, uncertain how to respond to such boldness, he had added, "Have a good day, ma'am." A good day. He was wishing her wellness and happiness. Such intimacy from someone she barely knew could only mean one thing. Over the next several days, Lyrith found excuses to visit areas where Jake Morrison worked. Each encounter brought new evidence of his intentions. In the cafeteria, he had offered her his seat when all the tables were full. When she dropped her data pad in the corridor, he had immediately retrieved it for her. When she struggled to reach something on a high shelf, he had appeared as if summoned and gotten it for her. The human was clearly demonstrating his protective instincts and his ability to provide for her needs. In Zalari culture, such behavior would be considered extremely forward, almost scandalous. But humans were different. Their courtship customs were more direct and practical. Lyrith began to plan her response. According to the data files, human females were expected to show appreciation for male attention through smiles and verbal thanks. She practiced human facial expressions in her mirror until she could produce what she hoped was an attractive smile. The next time she encountered Jake Morrison, she was ready. He was fixing a water recycler in one of the common areas when she walked by. As usual, he looked up and nodded politely. "Good afternoon, Princess." This was new. He had never used her title before. Lyrith felt her crystal patches warm with pleasure. He was acknowledging her status while still maintaining his courtship behavior. "Good afternoon, Jake Morrison," she replied, using the full formal version of his name as protocol demanded. He smiled at that, a genuine human expression that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Just Jake is fine, Your Highness. Just Jake." He was inviting her to use his intimate name, the name his family and close friends would use. This was moving very fast, even by human standards. "Jake," she said, testing the sound of it. His smile grew wider, and her crystal patches began to glow pink with embarrassment at her own boldness. "That water recycler giving you trouble?" she asked, trying to continue the conversation. "Nothing I can't handle," he said. "These old units just need a little patience and the right touch." Patience and the right touch. Was he speaking metaphorically about their developing relationship? Human courtship language was so subtle and complex. "I am sure you have the right touch for many things," she replied, hoping she was responding appropriately. Jake's face turned slightly red, which her research had taught her was a human sign of either embarrassment or arousal. "Thank you, Princess. I try my best." He tried his best. Such dedication, such commitment to excellence. These were excellent qualities in a potential mate. Their conversations continued over the following days. Jake Morrison always seemed pleased to see her and would stop whatever he was working on to speak with her. He asked about her homeworld, about Zalari culture, about her role in the trade negotiations. Such interest in her background and her work could only mean he was evaluating her as a long-term partner. Lyrith began to reciprocate by asking about his work, his home planet, his family. She learned that he came from a place called Ohio where his parents still lived. He had 2 sisters and a brother, all younger than him. He had left home at 18 to work on space stations because he enjoyed fixing things and traveling to new places. "Don't you miss your family?" she asked during one of their conversations. "Sure, but they understand. Mom always said I was too restless to stay in one place. She wanted me to see the galaxy and maybe find someone special to settle down with." Find someone special to settle down with. His mother had given him permission to seek a mate. This was clearly why he had come to this station. He was looking for a wife, and he had chosen her. The evidence was overwhelming. Jake Morrison had performed. The door ceremony had continued to show her preferential treatment, had shared personal information about his family and his intentions, and had been specifically sent by his mother to find a mate. What more proof did she need? But Lyrith knew she had to be careful. Zalari courtship customs were very specific and had to be followed exactly, or the bonding would be invalid. She needed to learn more about human customs to make sure she responded correctly. She spent hours in the station's library accessing human cultural databases. She learned about human marriage ceremonies, about engagement rings, about meeting the parents. It was all so different from Zalari traditions, but also oddly appealing. Zalari matings were arranged by families for political and genetic advantage. The two individuals involved rarely met before the bonding ceremony. But humans chose their own mates based on affection and compatibility. They called it falling in love, which sounded both dangerous and exciting. Was she falling in love with Jake Morrison? The warm feeling in her chest when she saw him certainly felt like something falling, and her crystal patches glowed brighter every time he smiled at her. Perhaps this was what humans called love. The more she watched him, the more impressed she became. Jake Morrison was kind to everyone, not just to her. He helped the other maintenance workers when they struggled with heavy equipment. He was patient with the cleaning crew who barely spoke standard language. He even helped elderly station residents carry their groceries. This generosity of spirit was exactly what her people needed. Zalari society was too focused on hierarchy and status. Someone like Jake Morrison could help them learn to treat everyone with respect and kindness. But first, she needed to make sure she was interpreting his signals correctly. Human courtship was apparently a gradual process that could take months or even years. She would need to be patient and respond appropriately to each stage of his courtship displays. The next phase, according to her research, would involve gift-giving and more formal declarations of intent. She began planning her response carefully. When Jake Morrison was ready to move to the next level of courtship, she would be prepared. What she did not know was that Jake Morrison was completely unaware that he was courting anyone. To him, Princess Lyrith was just another resident of the station who happened to be alien royalty. He was being polite to her the same way he was polite to everyone else. His mother had raised him to be a gentleman, and gentlemen treated all, ladies with courtesy and respect. The cultural misunderstanding was growing larger every day, and neither of them realized it was happening. Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stepped off the transport ship onto New Geneva Colony Station. The place looked like every other mining station he had worked on over the past 5 years, all metal walls and dim lighting with the constant hum of machinery in the background. He carried his single duffel bag over his shoulder and looked around at the busy loading dock. Workers moved cargo containers while ships came and went through the massive bay doors. "You must be the new maintenance guy," said a woman in a blue uniform walking up to him. She had short brown hair and looked tired. "I'm Commander Lisa Harper. Welcome to the edge of nowhere." Jake shook her hand. "Jake Morrison from Ohio. Thanks for the job." "Don't thank me yet," she said with a small smile. "This place eats maintenance engineers for breakfast. The equipment here is older than my grandmother and twice as stubborn. Follow me, and I'll show you around." They walked through long corridors filled with pipes and wiring. Jake noticed the place felt different from other stations. There was something in the air, a strange energy that made the hair on his arms stand up. The walls had markings he had never seen before, symbols that looked like they were made of light. "What are those?" he asked, pointing at the glowing marks. "Zalari writing," Commander Harper said. "We share this station with them now. They're our new trading partners. Strange folks, but they pay well for our minerals." Jake had heard about the Zalari on the news feeds. First alien contact happened 3 years ago when one of their ships broke down near Earth. They were tall and thin, with skin that looked like it had pieces of crystal growing out of it. Some people said they were beautiful, others said they were scary. Jake had never seen one in person. "Are there many of them here?" he asked. "About 50. They have their own section on level 7, but they use the common areas too. Just be polite and stay out of their way. Their princess is here for some big trade deal." They reached the maintenance bay where Jake would be working. It was a large room full of tools and spare parts. 3 other engineers were fixing a broken air recycler. They looked up when Jake walked in. "Fresh meat," one of them said with a grin. "I'm Tony. That's Carlos. And the quiet one is Pete. Hope you like working double shifts because this place never stops breaking." Jake spent the rest of the day learning about the station's systems. The Zalari had made changes to parts of the station to fit their needs. Their technology was more advanced, but very different from human machines. Everything they built seemed to grow rather than be assembled. Their control panels looked like living things. "Their stuff is weird, but it works," Carlos explained. "Just don't touch anything that glows purple. Last guy who did that was stuck to the wall for 6 hours." The next morning, Jake was assigned to check the blast doors on level 6. These were the big, heavy doors that could seal off sections of the station in an emergency. Each door weighed several tons and needed regular maintenance to make sure they opened and closed properly. He was working on the 3rd door when he heard voices coming down the corridor. The voices sounded musical, like people singing instead of talking. He looked up and saw a group of Zalari walking toward him. The first thing Jake noticed was how tall they were. The shortest one was at least 7 feet high. They wore flowing clothes that seemed to change color as they moved. Their skin was pale with patches of what looked like crystals on their arms and faces. The crystals caught the light and made rainbow patterns on the walls. In the middle of the group was someone who was clearly important. She was taller than the others, and her crystal patches were bigger and brighter. She wore a crown made of the same crystal material, and her clothes were pure white. She moved like a dancer, smooth and graceful. Jake realized this must be the Princess Commander Harper had mentioned. He had never met royalty before, human or alien, so he was not sure what to do. His mother had taught him to be polite to everyone, especially ladies, so he decided to treat her like he would treat any woman back home. The group was having trouble with the blast door Jake had just finished fixing. One of the smaller Zalari was trying to push it open, but the door was heavy and he was not strong enough. The others were just standing there watching him struggle. Jake put down his tools and walked over to help. "Excuse me," he said politely. He reached past the struggling Zalari and grabbed the door handle. The door was indeed heavy, but Jake was used to manual labor. He pulled it open easily and stepped to the side. "After you, ma'am," he said to the princess, holding the door open. The entire group stopped moving. They all stared at Jake like he had just grown a second head. The princess looked at him with her large silver eyes, and her crystal patches began to glow brighter. The other Zalari started making rapid musical sounds to each other. Jake was not sure what was happening, but he kept holding the door. His mother had taught him that a gentleman always held doors for ladies. It did not matter if the lady was human or alien or purple with crystals. Good manners were good manners. The princess finally moved through the doorway, but she kept looking back at Jake. Her crystal patches were glowing pink now, and she was making soft, musical sounds. The other Zalari followed her through the door, still making excited noises to each other. "You're welcome," Jake called after them, though he was not sure they understood English. He went back to work on the next door, but he kept thinking about the encounter. The Zalari had acted very strange when he held the door. Maybe they did not have doors on their home planet, or maybe they thought he was being rude somehow. Later that day, Pete found him in the maintenance bay. "I heard you met the princess today," he said. "Yeah, helped her with a stuck door. Did I do something wrong?" Pete shrugged. "Don't know. But word is going around the Zalari sections that something big happened. They've been talking in their musical language all afternoon. Commander, Harper wants to see you." Jake found Commander Harper in her office looking worried. "Tell me exactly what happened with the Zalari princess today," she said. Jake explained about the door and how he had held it open for her. Commander Harper listened carefully and then rubbed her temples. "Did anyone explain Zalari customs to you?" she asked. "No, just to be polite and stay out of their way." "Well, you were definitely polite. Maybe too polite. I'm getting reports from their translator that you performed some kind of ceremony. They won't tell me what kind, but they seem very excited about it." Jake felt confused. "I just held a door open. How is that a ceremony?" "With aliens, who knows? Just keep doing your job and try to avoid the princess for now. The last thing we need is a diplomatic incident over a misunderstanding." But Jake could not avoid the princess because she seemed to be everywhere he worked now. Every time he turned around, she was there with her group, watching him fix things. When he held doors for other people, she watched even more carefully. When he said please and thank you to the other workers, her crystal patches glowed brighter. Jake started to worry that he had accidentally insulted her or her people somehow. He tried to be extra polite whenever he saw her, but that only seemed to make things worse. The other Zalari would whisper to each other and point at him when they thought he was not looking. By the end of his first week on the station, Jake was completely confused about what was happening. All he had done was hold a door open for someone who needed help. It was the kind of thing his mother had taught him to do since he was 5 years old. He could not understand why the aliens were making such a big deal about it. Little did Jake know that his simple act of courtesy had been interpreted as something entirely different by the Zalari. In their culture, offering physical assistance to someone of higher rank was not just polite behavior. It was the first step in a very serious courtship ritual that had not been performed in over 100 years.